Hi, my name is Jacob Vargas. I'm an actor. I play the role of Richard Chavez in the feature film Cesar Chavez, American Hero. I grew up in this community. I graduated from San Fernando High School. And I'm here in front of the Cesar Chavez Memorial in the city of San Fernando to share with you the amazing life of Cesar Chavez and the critical role that we, the people of the San Fernando Valley, played in achieving some of the victories gained by the United Farm Workers. For more than a century, farm workers had been denied a decent life in the fields and communities of California's agricultural valleys. Essential to the growth of the multi-billion-dollar agricultural business, farm workers were the most ignored, exploited, and vulnerable population in this country.
If someone got sick, if someone got hurt, fall off the ladder, there was nothing to cover them. And if they couldn't work, they'd be replaced.
The farm workers didn't have the right to clean drinking water, access to portable toilets, lunch breaks, or short rest during the workday. Child labor was commonplace, and the farm workers had no right to organize a union. Farm workers were not entitled to the minimum wage or unemployment insurance. For many generations, farm workers had been exposed to poisonous pesticides. The side effects were devastating.
Pues nunca dicen cuándo van a echar
They
el
never tell you when they spray
pesticida.
pesticides
Porque
because
no
they
les
don't care
interesa la
about
salud
people's
de
health.
las personas. Pues de primero sí me daba un
At
poco de
first,
coraje.
I was very angry, but no longer.
No sé por
I
qué lo
don't know
seguirán
why they
poniendo.
keep using them.
Living conditions were just as bad as the working conditions.
We ended up going to where we were going to live, and it was a shack. It was a 12 by 12, maybe 10 by 10, no running water inside, only one light hanging from a wire in the middle of the room, and the outhouse was maybe 50 feet behind us.
And so it was really a case where workers weren't looked at as human beings. They were kind of like implements of work.
100 miles north of the San Fernando Valley, Cesar Chavez and Dolores Huerta combined forces with their Filipino brothers to create what would eventually become the United Farm Workers of America. Instead of building a traditional union, Chavez envisioned a social movement, a crusade he later called La Causa, or the cause, that inspired many farm workers to organize and take on the growers. By doing so, they not only changed their lives, but changed the role Latinos played in American history.
Today we have a union in California, and tomorrow we should have a union for all farm workers all over America.
Agribusiness in California is the biggest industry in the state. That time it was. And it was thought to be impossible that he would bring these agricultural giants to meet the terms of what they were demanding for people. And when you think about what he did, it's incredible that he was able to be successful in that.
He got America to understand that farm workers pay a tremendous price for the opportunity to put food on people's tables.
By the 1980s, the UFW had over 80,000 members and were considered one of the most successful labor unions in American history. Such impacts were felt from all corners of the world, including the San Fernando Valley. The San Fernando Valley has an agricultural history dating back to the 1800s. By the 1920s, agriculture was the way of life for the residents of the valley. The majority of Mexican Americans lived in the northeast side of the valley, in the communities of San Fernando and Pacoima, and obtained jobs as farm workers. Many Mexican American families would migrate north from San Fernando to areas like Saugus, Oxnard, San Jose, and other places to pick fruit and vegetables.
I started picking when I was maybe 9 years old or so. I started going with my mother and my sister picking apricots. And then about the end of July, the pears would come, we would pick pears, and we did that, pretty much 6 days of the week. And we lived there on the ranch, it wasn't even a house, it was kind of like part of a barn where we had our kitchen, and we lived in an old Navy bus. And those were our sleeping quarters, you might say. That's what we did every summer. For about almost 18, 19 years, from about 1947, I was almost 2 years old till about I was 17, 18 years of age. It was a big contrast and change from San Fernando. I mean, for one day you're here in the city, population all over, friends, kids. Can you imagine summer, comes around, we're out of school, to vacation. My friends are signing up for Little League. Some of them are going to go into some camping experiences. I'm seeing all of that, and what am I doing? I'm packing up to go, well, we're going to go do our camping, but it's a different kind of camping, right?
During the 1960s, many minorities were living below the poverty line. President Lyndon Baines Johnson responded with creating legislation that would provide funds for low-income communities to build centers that would provide a variety of services. The only active Latino organization in the valley was a Latin American Civic Association, and through LACA, they were able to get funds to create youth centers.
And so in San Fernando, we had a particular center called Joint Venture. And there we started to attend meetings and form youth groups, and not only that, but started to get informed about, social issues and social causes.
And one of those causes was a farm workers' struggle.
The San Fernando Valley has been a strong supporter of the farm worker movement, and we've been there from the very, very beginning.
Many Mexican Americans, now calling themselves Chicanos, got involved with the farm workers and created a collective called the Valley Friends of the Farm Workers. Their office was located in Pacoima on Van Nuys Boulevard.
Yeah, you would go there and find out where the next boycott was going to be held, or where they needed people to go, and if you needed a ride and transportation, they would provide that.
With the farm working experience fresh in their minds, many Chicanos from the valley knew UFW's demands were a just cause. With the youth involvement from both Joint Venture and the UFW office of Pacoima, the residents of the valley took up the fight as their own. By the mid-1960s, farm workers were fed up with how they were being treated in the fields. The newly formed, the NFWA, planned to build their union slowly and build their membership before taking on any grower or going on strike. But on September 8, 1965, Chavez was caught off guard when the Filipino farm workers went on strike. The NFWA needed to make a quick decision: either join the strike or not. On September 16, 1965, with only $70 in the bank, the NFWA joined their Filipino brothers and launched a strike against the entire table grape industry, creating the historic grape strike of 1965. Chicanos from all across California took up the farm worker plight as their own and began to strike with their brothers and sisters in the fields, carrying signs saying huelga, or strike. 6 months after the grape strike started,
the money stopped, not stopped, but it slowed down. The money that was coming in, the food donations for the strikers were kind of slowing down, so we knew we had to do something really quick.
Chavez wanted to make a statement, wanted to show the strength of their cause, so he decided to make a pilgrimage. On March 17, 1966, a group of about 70 farm workers began a 340-mile walk from Delano to Sacramento.
And Cesar called it a peregrinacion. He wanted to be a pilgrimage. He wanted to be penitential. And we actually had a meeting about this because all of the workers, well, why should we be penitent? The growers are the ones that are oppressing us. They're the ones that are abusing us. And then he said to them, look at your own lives. I'm sure that everybody here has something they need to be penitent about, right?
They would stop at farm working towns along the way to rest, pray, and recruit.
I marched part of the way, and then the other half I went ahead and I waited so that we knew where we would position our supporters or our people that were coming from the San Fernando Valley. We were in the front steps of the Capitol, and what I first saw was 3 men, 3 charros, and then you saw 10 other people, all with farm workers flag, then 20, then 30, then 100, then 200. Oh my God.
They arrived on April 10th, Easter Sunday, with 10,000 supporters.
You were emotionally affected by it. I mean, you're in tears. You're in tears because you see the power of the people, the dignity of these farm workers, very humble people, but standing up for their dignity, standing up for their rights. I mean, how much more emotionally can that be?
Even though 10,000 supporters landed on the Capitol, Governor Pat Brown did not show up. And so, la huelga sigue, the strike continues.
At the beginning of the strike, there's always a lot of enthusiasm, right? And then as time goes on, it gets a little bit tougher and people don't have anything to eat. And so it became very tough. And I think that people realized that we were going to have to do something more than just picket. And so that was when the boycott came in. We started off boycotting a certain brand. It was against Jamara. And then the rest of the growers got together and let Jamara borrow their labels so that they could, confuse the consumer. And it was really Dolores Huerta that pushed. She says, well, okay, if they're going to do that, then let's boycott them all.
The UFW sent organizers all across the world to populate the boycott. Residents of the San Fernando Valley did their part as well. They would boycott Boys Market in Sylmar, as well as Safeway in San Fernando. Cesar Chavez spoke at dozens of university campuses across the nation, asking students to support La Causa by boycotting grapes. At Cal State Northridge, inspired by Chavez's appearance on campus, Chicano students boycotted the cafeteria, forcing management to remove grapes from the menu.
We had an opportunity to see the farm workers themselves come into the city and walk the picket line. And so understand that for the farm workers, these were, strangers that were coming to the market. But for some of us who lived here, it was our relatives, it was our neighbors, it was our friends. And we were confronting them with this idea of not going into the market because of what? Because of a boycott. What's a boycott? What is the UFW? And so you really had to prepare yourself and know what this whole cause was about.
In one particular market, in La Rinda Plaza,
the manager put a table out there in front of the market with all kinds of grapes free, giving them to the customers. Yeah? I mean, it was like, just waving a red flag in front of us and, just teasing us, just trying to antagonize us. And they antagonized me, I'll tell you that. I was also angry. And the farm workers kept their cool. They probably saw it a lot of times before coming over here.
Many times protesters were humiliated or confronted violently.
One time, these two guys, it happened really quick. One of the girls was picketing, and they put their arm under each of the girls' right here, put their hand here, and put her up against the wall and punched her. And in those days, the police wouldn't take, reports. So we were kind of out there on our own.
In 1967, Chavez became increasingly concerned about the union's ability to keep the people under control. After 2.5 years, They had only 9 contracts signed. Morale was unraveling, and picket captains were failing to show up at the fields. Desperation set in, and many people were planning to resort to violence. Chavez needed to do something drastic to make the union recommit to nonviolence. On February 15, 1968, Chavez fasted for 25 days, refusing all food except water. He believed that change can only be reached through nonviolence. His fasting proved to be a very powerful organizing tool. The UFW were attacking the growers from all sides. Farm workers striking at the fields, students and unionists boycotting markets and blocking distribution centers. The boycott was so effective that the UFW managed to stop sales of California table grapes in Detroit, Chicago, New York, Boston, Philadelphia, Montreal, and Toronto. On July 29, 1970, Giamara and 26 other grape growers signed a historic contract. The first major contract in American history signed between a grower and a farm workers union. What was to be 2 weeks of striking turned out to be 5 years of struggle. The Great Boycott became the most ambitious and successful boycott in U.S. history, with 17 million Americans participating. Cesar Chavez left an enduring legacy that not only impacted Chicanos, but all walks of life. Throughout the United States, hundreds of schools, plazas, libraries, awards, and streets have been named in honor of Cesar Chavez. Chavez's legacy is felt deeply in the city of San Fernando. Under the leadership of Mayor Dr. Jose Hernandez, the City Council passed a resolution to create one of the largest memorials dedicated to the legacy of Cesar Chavez. The memorial is 23,000 square feet.
And as you enter the memorial, you first start with the fountain, which is the shape of the farm worker eagle. And then directly in front of the fountain is a statue of Cesar Chavez, 6 feet, bronze. In front of him are 10 metal silhouettes of farm workers working in the fields and gradually lifting up and becoming empowered as a union. And then to the left of the memorial is a 100-foot mural of Cesar Chavez. And then there's a little plaza at the end of the memorial where students or whoever could sit there and just contemplate what they experienced. Cesar Chavez is a giant of a figure, even though he was only 5'6.5". But in a lot of people's minds and eyes, he's a giant. He's a giant to me. And I feel privileged and honored to have been able to create the memorial to Cesar Chavez in the city of San Fernando.
The UFW had an impact not just on farm work and the labor struggle, but just the struggle in general in terms of civil rights, in terms of social change, in terms of the question of social justice.
I think Chavez gave all of us hope. I think Chavez inspired us to be better.
In 1994, Cesar Chavez was posthumously awarded the Presidential Medal of Freedom by President Clinton. Helen Chavez, Cesar's widow, accepted the medal. This award is the nation's highest civilian award for service to the nation. In the same year, San Fernando became the first city in the nation to make Cesar Chavez's birthday a holiday. In 2000, California established a state holiday in honor of Cesar Chavez. As of 2009, 8 states recognized Cesar Chavez's birthday, March 31st, as a state holiday.
I think of him as not only as our Chicano hero, as a labor leader, but I think of him as an American hero because he not only impacted the life of farm workers, but he affected the life of all Americans. Right now, the reason we have more safe food is because of his battle over pesticides. And so he is an American hero in many other ways other than the way we as Mexicanos, Chicanos see him.
In 2012, President Barack Obama recognized Cesar Chavez's place in history as one of America's most distinguished civil rights leaders by dedicating Cesar's burial site at Keene, California as a national monument.
Cesar would be the first to say that this is not a monument to one man. The movement he helped to lead was sustained by a generation of organizers who stood up and spoke out and urged others to do the same.
It's important that people understand that while we celebrate our past, we should always be mindful that there's a lot of work that still needs to be done.
Prior to the leadership of the UFW, the majority of the farm workers were American citizens. Today, the majority of the farm labor are immigrants from Mexico and Central America, and many of them are undocumented workers, which leads to many cases of abuse and injustice. A good percentage of today's farm labor comes from the southern Mexican state of Oaxaca. In San Diego, these migrant workers live in terrible conditions. Their homes are makeshift tents, and some sleep in the middle of the fields. They work countless hours for low pay. Few complain to state or federal agencies for fear of losing their job or being deported. The UFW and other farm justice coalitions are still fighting against the use of pesticides. Farm workers and their children are vulnerable to a painful array of illnesses. In 2005, a migrant farm worker from Florida gave birth to Carlitos. The baby was born without arms or legs, just stumps. Exposure to pesticides are detrimental to farm working communities. As many as 300,000 farm workers are injured annually by pesticides, and of these, as many as 1,000 die. And though the challenges are plenty, hope still prevails. In 1975, California passed the Agricultural Labor Relations Act, the first law recognizing the rights of farm workers to organize and bargain collectively. Chavez visited San Fernando High School in 1985. He asked students to support the fight against the use of pesticides. The students responded by distributing flyers at local markets, describing the horrendous working and living conditions workers were forced to endure. From 1994 to 2004, the UFW has gained new contracts representing field workers in rose, mushroom, strawberry, wine grape, and lettuce. In 2013, the National Park Service, with legislation proposed by Congresswoman Hilda Solis, announced plans to start construction of the Cesar Chavez National Historic Park, honoring Chavez's contribution as a labor leader, civil rights advocate, and environmentalist. Cesar Chavez served 2 years in the U.S. Navy during World War II. In recognition of Chavez's service, in 2013, the Navy named a ship in honor of the courageous labor leader. And the fight continues. For over 20 years, the San Fernando-based Cesar Chavez Commemorative Committee has played an incredible role in keeping Chavez's legacy alive through marches and rallies. Cesar Chavez's legacy lives in the hearts and minds of those who he inspired to continue to fight for social justice and equal opportunity for all. Sí se puede.
We're very fortunate that we had an opportunity to assist that movement and to participate in it. Very fortunate that it was only, 100 miles from here was the very center of that entire movement.
I am Cesar Chavez.
Yo soy Cesar Chavez.
I am Cesar Chavez.
I'm Cesar Chavez.
Yo soy Cesar Chavez.
I am Cesar Chavez.
And I fight for civil rights.
I fight to get dangerous chemicals out of our food supply.
Yo lucho por los derechos humanos.
I fight for the right to vote.
Yo lucho por una reforma migratoria justa.
And I fight for human rights.
I am Cesar Chavez. I fight for my community.
One of the many reasons the UFW was so successful was because ordinary people were doing extraordinary things. Both farm workers and their supporters were committed to social change and never gave up on their pursuit of justice. And like them, you too can make a difference in your community. All it takes is a little bit of courage, a willing heart, and action.
De colores se visten los campos en la primavera. De colores son los pajarillos que vienen de afuera.